So, what comes to mind when I say the writing process? What picture do you have in your head? If you're an ELA teacher and if you're using, your teacher guide and the curriculum that you've been given, you might have the kids with folders and they're labeled and it says brainstorm, outline, draft, revise, final, something like that. And you might have posters in your room that say the same thing and they're really pretty from Evermore or whatever that you got at the store. And I want us to then also shift our thoughts over to some names. So I want you to think about Stephen King, Maya Angelou, Shakespeare, Faulkner. I want you to think about the classics. I want you to think about the modern stories. Think about John Green. Think about Louis Sachar. All these people who have written amazing things. And do you think that their process was the same? That they did the exact same thing in the exact same order? I would say probably no, not at all. The authors that I know and the authors that I have studied and read about, their process is messy and frustrating, and then it's beautiful and exhilarating. And part of it is that what they go through with each project that they do, it's different each time. And I found that for myself as an author, when I was writing, I would approach every book differently. And there was actually this one plotting book that almost all the authors I knew, we were all using it. It's called Save the Cat. Amazing book. If you ever want to go and write your own script or novel, go get that book. And there's one that's geared toward plotting novels, and there is a graphic organizer that goes with it, and you can print it out, fill it in. It's like a fill it in thing. And then they have tons of them all over the internet. You can just get it printed out, blah, blah, blah. But as I was reading through it, I would try one of these worksheets, and my thoughts, there were certain parts of it where I wanted to go into more depth. I needed more room to write some stuff. And some of them I didn't want to do it all. I just wanted to kind of let that part go. So I ended up redoing the entire thing myself so that it fit for me. And that is something I want you to consider when you're asking your students to write, is what is going to work for them. And not every graphic organizer will work exactly the same. It's not like, woo, this is it. This is the answer. I'm going to tell you what I do, though. So don't worry. We'll get into the details of how do you get them to brainstorm and organize and all of that. But when I first started publishing my books, I was just really shocked by how the experience was so different from what I had been asking of my students. Because even if you're a reporter for a newspaper and they ask you to cover a topic, the instructions from your editor are not, please go write a 5-paragraph essay. And when we're brainstorming, we do it in lots of different ways. It could be brainstorming on a piece of paper with just a free write of words. It might come out as sentences. It might come out as a conversation. And that's something I also want you to consider, is how do we get the kids to brainstorm? Super important. And I find that they really need to do it. And I teach them why it's important in that first lesson that I do on voice, because they'll discover that when you start brainstorming, your first idea is typically pretty much the first idea that most people have. And so you got to get past that. You've got to be original. You've got to get out of the cliche. And the only way to do that is through a particular way of brainstorming. Really important. But to get the words out and the ideas out, I like to give them choices of how they would like to do that. They might just hit record and record something for me of their thoughts on everything they want to do or not do. And so then as authors, we would start to write. And I may have brainstormed stuff. I may have only talked through it. I may have outlined it. I may have not outlined my book at all. there were several times that I started writing a novel and I didn't outline it all. I just started writing because this idea or this character, or it just came to me so quickly and I had to get this out on paper. And if somebody had said, no, 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 you can't just start writing. You're going to have to go and fill in this worksheet and then you can start, like, no, 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 you don't understand. And there's a TED Talk that I want you to go and listen to, teachers, if you have not. Elizabeth Gilbert does a TED Talk on, I'll put a link below because now I can't quite remember the title of it. It's like the magic of creativity, I think. She wrote a book called Big Magic, and so it's kind of like the summary of Big Magic. Amazing book. I'm on my second read of it. And it really, really would help teachers as well, just to see what goes through our brains when anybody's trying to create anything. It's absolutely amazing. Her TED Talk is phenomenal. And she has a thing in there talking about a story in which a poet grabs a poem by the tail. And I do want you to go back and listen to that because it really helps kind of encapsulate this whole idea. So we might like spend time writing, then go back and outline, then go in and do more revising. Like the process is kind of here and there. And this whole idea of just going from brainstorm to draft to peer edit to publish to, it just doesn't quite work. But don't worry, as we go through this podcast, I'm gonna break down all the things for you. It might feel a little scary sometimes, because you have a little bit of, you have to have a little bit of trust that they can do this, and they can. Because your students are our future authors. They're just little adults. And so we need to treat them, like the gem that they are, that they're going to be. That's how we need to picture them. I want to go through 4 different things to keep in mind about what real authors do. And I don't mean like real. I just mean like, those who take writing seriously, I guess. What is it that they do differently in order to do that? And then how can we incorporate that into our classroom? So, number 1, a writer will make choices, a lot of choices. In any time that you could get your students to make a choice about their writing, please do. If they are, it's not just you get to pick your topic, but it's you get to pick the way that you process through this as well. So I do require, like when we're doing an essay, I do require that my students have some form of pre-planning done. And some of them will pick the recording thing. Not many. That doesn't really happen that often, but you could do that. And then what I do is I have graphic organizers out for them, and I have 3 of them. And you'll see in my program, if you're in my program, the number 3 is very big with me. So is 7. So I have 3 out on the table, and I tell them, I want you to pick the one that's going to help you organize your thoughts. So they're going to make the decision about what works for them. One of them is kind of a traditional outline. Some of them just love that traditional stuff. That's what they've been doing. That's what they know. That's what they like. Another one might be one of those mind map things, where it's circles and lines or whatever I can find. That's sort of a mind map. And the third is nothing. It's a piece of paper. It's a white piece of paper. And I tell them, organize your thoughts the way that works for you. And several of them will always pick this. And it's so incredibly interesting to see how their minds work. If you do this, your mind will be blown. They just go in all of these different directions. And it's the coolest thing to see your kids start to suddenly become writers because you're giving them the choice. So there is structure in the writing program, but the approach to it is, I respect you as a writer because you will eventually become a writer in every part of your life. We're all writers. Okay, the second thing that writers do, they revise. And I would say they revise dramatically. It's writing is revising. And to revise means to which is again, and vise, which comes from the Latin root vision to see. So you see it again, you see it differently all over. So I've, rewritten whole chapters. I have started all over again. I've done little edits, I've done huge edits. One of the interesting things is that usually, I find when I start writing a story that the beginning of my story is actually chapter 3, like almost every single time. I will start writing, and then I have heard this from so many authors that they realize that the first chapter or 2 is just for the author. It's just for them to establish who this character is, what's going on here, where are we, what's the flavor, what's the tone, all that stuff. And then you get confident and then you hit chapter 3, and then that should be your first line. And you'll notice in your students' writing that it's typically not all of them, but it's like the 3rd or 4th sentence that actually should be their hook, because they're doing a walk up to whatever they're writing. They're getting warmed up. They're getting into the story, and it might start with the clouds were ominous and cackling at me, right? But maybe that was their 3rd or 4th sentence, and their first few sentences were like, one day I came home and we drove up to the house and it had been raining and mom, blah, blah, blah. The clouds were blah, blah, blah. So it's those first couple of sentences there is for the writer to establish where they are. And then I tell them, cut those. And that's, they love this. I'm like, just cut those sentences. Look at this. And then you have them read it out loud. I say, I want you to imagine this is the first line of your story. Read it out loud to me. And then they read it. And then they look up and I'm like, doesn't that sound so cool? And they're like, yeah. And I said, yeah, that's how you start, with confidence right there. You just cut out that stuff that you needed and then just start where it's happening. And I want you to think about it like, I know I do a lot of sports metaphors, but this one's a gymnastics metaphor. So, on the pommel horse, is that what it is? The one where they run and jump and flip in the air? Sorry, everyone. The one where the horse. I am clearly speaking about things that I don't remember anything about. But you know how they all have their own process before they go do it? They get up there, they bounce, or they crack their knuckles, or they twist their back, and then they start running and they do their own type of run, right? They look kind of goofy. Some of them run like crazy. But are they judged on the way they run up to that? They're not. They're only judged on the jump and the landing. So their process to get there is their own process that they needed to do, that they needed to come up with, that works for them. So it might look a little different from what we're doing or thinking, but gymnasts need it, and so do writers. The third thing is that writers will talk. We as authors have critique partners, editors, we have writing groups, we go to meetings, we go listen to other people talk about writing. We're in this world of talking about writing constantly. So I would involve more talking than you can think of. Turn and talk about your ideas, turn and talk about a sentence. And in my workshop, the students are in trios. I've always found, like I said, the number 3, very, very big with me, that having a group of 3 talk through what they've written can be pretty powerful, because you don't have they can't disappear. If it's 4 or more, then 1 or 2 of them are going to disappear. If there's 3 of them, then at least if there's one quiet one, and then the other 2 can have a conversation because it's awkward. But 3 works really well. And have them talk about their writing after they've written. Super important. So you're going to create moments for your students to talk like writers. They're going to ask for help or bounce around ideas or find diamonds in each other's writing. I'll talk about more about diamonds in another podcast. That's a big part of the program. Now, I'm going to move on to number 4, which is what writers do. And writers read. I mean, that's kind of obvious, right? So we read, but we read differently. Like you read as a writer, you notice craft, you notice techniques, you notice tone, you notice how did they start their sentence? How did they end that chapter? How did they, you ask your question, and there's so many novels that I have in my bookshelf that they're totally marked up. And I've got notes to myself, I'm highlighting things. So sometimes I read for fun and I don't mark my book up. It's kind of rare, but I love to notice what other writers are doing. Now, I want to go back to this concept of the process posters. The brainstorming part of it is still there. It's just that they're going to have some decisions to make about what works best for them. The outlining part of it, some of the planning, it's also still there. And I also suggest doing some pit stops or check-ins that they earn points. Think of it like they gather points along the way to the end before if you're doing an essay, right? They're going to gather points till they get to the final part of the essay. And maybe even the points along the way count just as much as the final draft, because all of this stuff is super important. So they're brainstorming, they are outlining or getting their ideas out there. And you might find, though, that some of them say, I don't want to outline. And I often will say, okay, you probably will find that you need to later, won't you? And 100% of the time, they go and they start writing, and then they come back up there about 10 minutes later, like, ugh. So it's kind of up to you if you absolutely require it or not. I mean, ultimately, I do, because I want them to, like I said, gather the points along the way, get the 10 points for that. And then they're going to go into drafting. And sometimes in teacher land, we call that sloppy first or whatever, sloppy draft. Authors in the real world have a much more colorful word that they use to describe that, but it's the same thing. And when I traveled around and talked to students across the country, really, I would tell them this analogy that if you imagine that you are in an art class and you are going to create, like, you're going to make a mug out of clay, or you're going to make some statue out of clay, or whatever, you're going to make this amazing thing, right? And so you don't just, like, the clay is always sitting up on the teacher's big table at the front, and it's enormous. It's just this huge chunk of clay, and you're supposed to go up there and take your string or wire and you cut out your part of it. But you don't go up to the huge thing of clay and try to just and carve out your masterpiece. You've got to take your chunk and you figure out how much you think you need, and you take your string or your wire and you lasso it, and you take your chunk and you have it in your hands sitting there, and you're walking back to your table, and this is your chunk of clay. And you're like, this is it. I have enough to work with. And so that chunk of clay is your draft. It's not pretty. It's not done. It's not anything you're going to give to anyone yet, but you have something to work with. And you absolutely have to do that for your students. Tell them to get their chunk of clay, which is their draft, because then they will have something to work with, and they'll be able to get to the revision process in a much more efficient way. Now, you may be thinking, this sounds great and all, but how am I going to actually do this with 30 students, and we've got this pacing guide and everyone's breathing down my neck, and maybe you have 6 classes a day? How do you even do this? This is all like a long unfolding here on the podcast. I'll break down all of the steps to this. If you want to hop ahead and go get the training, you can look for the link below. I have a 10 video training where I show you can actually see all the documents, all the things that I use to get the kids to make their own goals, the structure of it all. It's all in there. But for now, I want you to try something. It's a small thing, but I want you to, if you've never done this, give this a try. And that is to model writing with your own chunk of clay. So I'm not saying when you go up there and you model an essay for them and you fake and pretend like you don't know what to do, like, I wonder what's next. It's so inauthentic, and they know what you're doing. But if you actually, like during workshop, if you actually sat down and wrote with them, and you tell them when you're doing the workshop that I'm going to write alongside with you today, and I'm going to pick path 2, skill number 4. That will all make sense later when I tell you more what that means. And when the timer tells you to start, you all sit down and you start writing, and you don't look up. But if somebody starts talking, you're going to look up and go, shh, I'm writing. And it's going to sound different and look different than if you were just sort of meandering around saying, shh, please don't talk. Everybody's writing. No talking, please. Like, that's, again, back to like, blah. But if you are really writing, like you want to do this and you want to write something good, you will authentically be like, shh, you guys, I'm trying to write. And there's something about you literally writing with them that makes them get on what they need to be doing. And then do the process with them. Share your writing and be vulnerable so that they can see that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Like, this is how I started, you all. Like when I taught 5th grade in Atlanta and I was doing that creative writing stuff, and we read Louis Sachar's Sideways Stories from Wayside School. That's the book that got me to realize, like, I could do this. I love this book. I could write silly, funny stuff. And I told that to my students, and they were like, yeah, you should totally do that. So I would write alongside with them, and then I would share my stuff, and I was so nervous. And I'd say, what did you think? And they were like, that was so good. We like this and we like that. And that was the beginning of this whole thing, was that one 5th grade classroom in 1992. And they encouraged me. And some of the stuff that's in that notebook that I wrote about ended up being in the classroom, the series that I wrote for Disney. And so it's so important to start getting your words out, to show them vulnerability, and to show them that the process is, sometimes it's messy, but it can be a beautiful thing in the end. So to recap, real writers will make choices. They will revise dramatically. They're going to talk through ideas with other people, and they're going to read books like writers. And you, my friend, you are a writer too. So get out there and write right along with them. I'll see you in the next one. Be sure to follow Beyond the Paragraph wherever you get your podcast, and share this with a teacher bestie. They will love you for it, and so will I. To go deeper and learn more about the structured writing method, go to structuredwritingteacher.com.